Welcome to Lucinda Beach, where I shall once again try to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that filming outside is not my skill set. In the background you may see the Palm Island group, and in the foreground you will see the book that I have just finished reading. 13 Lessons That Saved 13 Lives. Oh sun, oh joy. Okay. 13 Lessons That Saved 13 Lives. And we need to talk a little bit about the reason why I have this book. I probably would have had it anyway. We've got a blue cover, we've got a scuba diver on there, and when you turn to the back you see a photograph of the boys captive in the cage in Thailand. So I think probably the whole world was watching this event. Certainly nearly everyone I knew in Australia was following it avidly. In 2018, a sports team of 12 young boys in Thailand went on a caving expedition, and in an area where I have actually visited, the national park, and they and their coach went deep into the caves where a sudden flood from upriver, where the monsoon was going on, or the rainy season, flooded these caves, leaving them abandoned within terrifying circumstance. And for the longest time, several days, no one knew if they were alive or not. So those are the 13 lives. Most Australians that travel overseas have visited Thailand, and nearly everyone loves it. The people are gorgeous, the country is fascinating, it's full of history, beautiful nature, beaches, all the good things. The food is fantastic. And a lot of Thai people have moved to Australia, so it's a country that feels very close, very much like a neighbour, and very imminent. So we watched this potential tragedy, this exciting event unfold. And it was actually an Australian diver and anaesthetist that came up with a plan that helped get all those 13 lives out alive. So a circumstance that I knew a little bit about, was very interested and excited to learn more. Now on the cover you see John Volanthen is titled, is there at the top, as we assume the author. It's certainly about him. Every indication is that this book was written by John Volanthen. And I'm going to read the back cover. The inside story of the Thai cave rescue. So, British cave diver John Volanthen tells the unforgettable story of saving 13 lives in the least known, most inhospitable territory on Earth. That's a little bit exaggerated. And it details the nerve-wracking timeline of the Tham Luang rescue mission. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I don't pretend to be able to pronounce Thai. Each chapter also imparts a life lesson gleaned from John's previous rescues and record-breaking cave dives. These show how his approach can be applied to everyday obstacles and challenges. In this enthralling story of breathtaking courage and calm under extreme pressure, John reveals the mindset required for one of the most incredible rescues of all time. So I hadn't heard of John Volanthen, and when you read the back of the book, you get a little bit of a bio on him. He's been caving in England since the age of 14, record-holding British cave diver. A couple of details about the book: designed by Luke Bird, cover imagery of the diver is by Jakub Gojda, and Alamay provided the bubbles. So it's a bit of a mishmash of a cover, and I've got to be honest, while I enjoyed it, it's a bit of a mishmash of a book, because I think that anyone picking this book up and reading it is going to be assuming that it is about the expedition to Thailand which saved the 13 Thais in the cave. And it is about that a little bit. Here's the other thing. In the title page we've got John Volanthen with Matt Allen. And when you read the bio at the back, it sounds like Matt Allen was the writer. So how much of this was written by who, I'm not sure. If Matt Allen actually wrote it with information provided by John Volanthen, or John Volanthen wrote most of it and Matt Allen tidied it up for publication, that would explain some of the inconsistencies that I found with this story. So the structure of it is interesting, and everything that I found questionably not enjoyable about it is telegraphed on the cover and in the contents. So in the contents we've got, I don't know if you can see that, I can barely see anything because sun, tropical beach, right? So the individual lessons talk about lesson 1, start with why not. And every single one of these chapters, 1 till 13, with an end note called full circle at the back, and the introduction, it starts with a little bit about the actual cave incident. Actually, no, it doesn't even start with that. So the first thing you get is lesson 1, where he talks about start with why not, how first steps in any endeavour are always the hardest, how we give up on ideas because we think we can't do them instead of asking why can't I do them and going ahead. All the lessons, all the concepts, all the life information that John Volanthen shares with us is good information. It's very much positivity, ways to live your life, and I can see that it would work for many people. But having given that lesson start with why not, he then goes on to day 1, 28th of June 2018, when he first found out that the Wild Boars football team and their coach were missing somewhere in the Tham Luang caves in Thailand. And then he goes on through the different days as they were discovered by John himself and his dive buddy, or one that he's dived with a lot during cave dives. He also talks about how he's participated in other cave rescues and how cave diving is quite different from scuba diving. All of these are valid points and important points, things that are worth listening to. But in each chapter, you end up with, so chapter 1 is from page 23, chapter 2 starts on page 43, so you've got an idea of the chapter size, and while each one of them starts with a little bit about the actual cave situation and the rescue endeavour, there's a lot more about John Volanthen, his attitude to life, his can-do attitude, and he keeps telling us how these various lessons apply not only to the cave rescue, but to everything else in life. I honestly would have preferred a book that was more about the cave rescue, but I gather there really isn't that much of it, so I can see how that wouldn't be enough to pad out a whole book. And it feels to me like John Volanthen himself wants to talk more about self-help, I don't know, a way of living usefully and having a good attitude to life. And I can see why he would want to do that. I'm not necessarily the person who would be wanting to read that, especially. I've read enough self-help books in my life. I read occasional ones every now and then. If I pick up this, I'm actually expecting more about the cave dive. Now, for probably about the first half, I was thoroughly enjoying it. The writing is choppy, and I think that's a John Volanthen, Matt Allen thing. I think they were doing different things or had different ideas about how things needed to be done, and it didn't always mesh. I was enjoying the details about the cave rescue, the situation in Thailand, personal information about cave diving. I don't cave dive. No, I have nothing but respect for people who do, but it's not my cup of tea. I was enjoying all that, and I was more bearing with the life lessons than anything else. I'm not saying I disagree with them. I agree with them. I've actually implemented a few of them in my life, but this book wasn't about that for me, if that makes sense. About halfway, I also started to get this uneasy feeling that there was an inconsistency between what I was reading and perhaps what I'd heard previously about this endeavour. There is mention of the Australian cave diver and anaesthetist, without whom the rescue probably would not have been as successful as it actually was. But a lot more of it is about John and his dive partner Rick, I think. That's it, Rick. And each time he talks about this cave dive, he talks about other cave dives that he's done with Rick in other parts of the world, about how they've broken records and done things in cave diving, which are pretty cool. I do read about cave diving a fair bit. I would have liked this story to progress a bit faster, with a little bit less relevancy, a little bit less talking about caves in England and France that I'm not particularly familiar with, and the records or whatever that was set that, again, not particularly my cup of tea. Also, I've got to be honest, there is an element to the tone of this book that didn't sit well with me. It seems to me that John Volanthen is making this very much about himself and Rick. And they have problems with the Thai government or the Thai Navy, who were in charge of this rescue, not listening to them enough, not giving them enough credit, not letting them participate enough. But I don't think the Thais actually invited them there. I think that they and a lot of other cave divers and rescue divers who flocked to Thailand under these circumstances volunteered. So there was a Chinese team, there was a US Navy team, there was the Thai Navy divers who were technically in control, and in an emergency situation the rescue organisation of that country should be in control. I don't quite understand why John and Rick expected the Thais to be asking their advice when they hadn't even been invited there. He felt that they were being tolerated rather than being listened to, and of course they were. They weren't actually the original people there. They weren't actually, I don't believe they were actually invited. So there's some weird things about this. I also felt that there is a little bit of, I don't know if it's how it came about, there's a little bit of a main character syndrome happening here, because there's a lot of eyes. If you read one small page and there's 20 eyes in it there, I don't know if that's a writing characteristic or how he actually sees his world or not. Anyhow, he and Rick were the ones that managed to get all the way through to Cave 9 and discover the boys, all of them alive, and they were both instrumental in extracting them. But it wasn't just about them. Around day 7, chapter 6, lesson 6, Expect the Unexpected, which was when they discovered the boys alive. And then I'm going to read a bit more from lesson 8, days 8 and 9, where he says, "This was shaping up to be the most complex rescue mission I had ever worked on. Thankfully, our efforts were being supported by a collection of military and civilian specialists from Australia, America and Thailand, among others, individuals who were both skilled and effective. However, what was really needed were divers I had worked with previously, people I could trust, because without a strong team connection, I would eventually find myself fixed in a constant state of high alert as I worked." Why all the eyes? I respect what was done there by John and Rick and several other people, many of whom remain nameless, but I feel that this ended up being a book that's a bit of a mishmash. It's mostly John Volanthen talking about himself and his views on the world, which is interesting. It's a fair bit about cave diving in general, and it is written for someone who does not dive or do cave diving, because there's a long appendix at the back that tells you all these small terms that you may not know, like what an eddy is, what a dry suit is. So it's very much designed, I think, for people who know nothing about diving, let alone cave diving. And I would love to hear from someone who has read this, who isn't a diver and who didn't previously know, or perhaps someone who is a cave diver who has read this. I'd like their views on it, because I feel thoroughly ambivalent. One of the final sections is the 13 lessons and how important it is to start with why not, listen to the quiet voice, rest and decompress, etc., etc. Again, all good lessons. We then have an acknowledgement, which is where I discovered Matt Allen, the writer, was heavily involved in the writing of it. A glossary of things like designed for people who don't know anything about diving, who are reading this book. And finally, there's actually a really interesting map. It's the rescue control map from the mission control whiteboard, and it gives you a very good image of the caves, which bits are flooded, which bits aren't. And even with that map, it was drawn in the mission room by Rick, not by the Thais. The Thais at first didn't really know what that was about. I do feel like if a book like this was written by someone from the Thai Navy divers, it would have looked quite different. And as someone who was watching this from the other side of the world, I kept stopping and thinking, wait, what? Not sure about that. Not sure that's really how it worked. Anyhow, thank you for listening to me rave about this. I did still like this book. I may read it again. I'm definitely holding on to it for now. And in any case, whether you read it or not, you should read good books. Bye.